Welcome to MapleWoodian.com podcast. Very pleased to have on the phone Marshall Crenshaw, longtime recording artist, singer, movie star. How you doing, Mr. Crenshaw?
I've got no complaints right this second. How are you?
That's always good. Great. Well, you're going to be at the Woodland on Friday in Maplewood, April 10th, and that'll be for the Rent Party, which, of course, is a great fundraising outlet and a great show to get people into that facility that's been refurbished recently and does good work. And I know you were in Maplewood a few years ago for Maple Woodstock, so this is kind of
I remember that day.
That was a blast, and I know everyone had a great time, so it's going to be a good time for you. But for those who don't know you, your career goes way back. We're looking at more than 30 years.
Yep.
And of course, you had the big hits "Someday, Some Way" and "Whenever You're on My Mind." But what have you been doing musically in the last few years that maybe is similar to that people might not know? But I know you still do a lot of live performances. Has your music evolved or changed? You kind of do much of the same approach.
Well, it's all me, right? But yeah, of course. I mean, life is constant change, right? Pretty much, I would say. So, I certainly hope that there's been growth and evolution and all that business. I know that there has over time. But just try to get better and smarter, and so hopefully I've been able to sort of do that.
What do you think of the way the music industry has changed? We always hear from a lot of people it's really hard to get out there because, it's mostly digital music and there's a lot of free music or stolen music. Or is it easier some ways for younger talents or for yourself to get music out because there's the web, there's digital options? How do you sort of see how it's changed in that regard? Or has it?
As far as I know, it's always been kind of a Wild West type thing, Like I grew up with rock and roll music, and that was mostly indie labels, and, usually, a lot of sordid stories from that time period. But great music, but the stories behind the music are like all about criminals and criminal behavior and so on and so forth. But anyway, I don't know. It's just it was hard to get into when I got into it, and now it's harder, but in different ways. You just have to kind of find your way out there if you're interested in trying to develop some kind of an audience as a musician. You just have to figure out how to do it. There's never been a roadmap or a rule book, I would say. A lot of things are in flux right now, though. The bottom line is like corporations want to steal everybody's lunch. That's just reality, And everybody, including artists and musicians, just have to be mindful of that and, hip to it and try to push back against it. So that's what, musicians, I guess, and artists and interested parties are trying to sort out a whole range of changes, but it's just, like I said before, change is constant. Personally, I just kind of jumped right on board with the whole digital era myself, as soon as I found out that I could go into my living room and have basically a record store in my living room. I was interested in that right away. I like the whole thing. I just, like always, everybody just has to fight to make sure that they get what they think they deserve, I guess, or whatever. It's just a lot of things. I'm actually going to be at this event on the 13th of April that has to do with some legislation that Gerald Nadler from New York State is trying to pass, and it's all like a big package of things, pertaining to copyright law and royalty payments and stuff like that.
And Nadler, where he's a New York, he's a New York congressman. Where and what is that going to be about?
Well, I just explained it, but it's sort of like a press event, I think.
Ah, okay.
with some artists.
Do you know where that's going to be? I would assume in New York if it's in Adler.
Yeah, I forget where it's going to be. It's in New York City. I just heard about it the other day, and I agreed that I would go.
Excellent. And what is so this is more to protect artists and to keep the copyright protections going?
Yeah, again, it just goes back to the thing with corporations.
Right.
Like when the satellite radio companies started, they negotiated a discount rate with the performing rights societies, and it was supposed to be temporary until they got their businesses established, And then when the agreement expired, they told the performance rights societies, well, screw you, we don't need you. You know what I mean? Like they went back on their commitment. And so that, that's a bad thing to do. That's not right. I love satellite radio. I listen to it all the time, but it's just it's just the same old story. It's always a matter of people being aware of what's happening with. Anyway, I think I've made my point.
No, it's great, and I see your website is very active, and you have a lot of EPs and a lot of new music that people can download that way and can order that way. But do you think it's gotten to the point where is a lot of it theft still? People trade music, or has that always been the case? You could record an album on cassette. People trade cassettes. Is it there's enough money to be made revenue wise, or you still have to do a lot of the touring and everything that you do so well?
Let me see. I mean, this is kind of like just stuff that you read. I mean,
sure.
They say that piracy is down from where it was in the days of Napster. That's what I read. That people mostly do go to like Spotify and iTunes and places like that where you pay a little bit for the music or pay something for it. So there's less. Just that's what they say. I don't know. Honestly, my royalty statements. If I'm not having a hit, or if I haven't had a hit lately, or if there isn't some kind of blip that makes things jump up, it tends to stay at about the same rate. I've got like 3 or 4 songs that were hits that just kind of are perennials on the radio in different parts of the world.
Absolutely.
So my royalties have dropped a little bit since the digital age came along, but I just think it's just a matter of people working to get things sorted out. So that everybody gets a fair share, or that people stick to what what commitments that they made.
And you also, again, for people who don't know, you're from Michigan, and I'm reading here you started playing guitar when you were about 10, and had some bands with your brother was in with you. How did you sort of get into the business, and when did you really know you had something?
Well, I just, I loved rock and roll from the time I was a child. I knew at some point in my life, probably maybe by 10, 12 years old, that I wanted some kind of outlaw occupation, I just saw all the, I just grew up where there was a kind of a conformist mentality, and I just never was happy to, I was always at odds with my surroundings as a kid, and so like having the kind of work life that I have really suits me. It's sort of like what I decided I wanted when I was young.
What was the town you grew up in? It was outside Detroit. Was it suburbs or a small town or?
Yeah, it was a town called Berkeley, Michigan, which is about 3 miles north of the northern border of Detroit. So it was Detroit area. I never say that I'm from Detroit, though. I think people that say they're from Detroit, if they didn't really grow up in Detroit, are making some kind of false claim, trying to sound like a badass. And I always say that I'm from the Detroit area.
And were your parents any kind of musicians, or were they big on music?
I should say, actually, first that I've lived now in, the New York region longer than I lived in the Detroit area.
Excellent.
No, neither. My parents were not musicians, but my dad was really like a lot of. You read about a lot of rock and roll musicians who had fraught relations with their dad. And
yeah.
I did some of the time. Definitely, he could be a very vexing little guy sometimes, but he loved music, and he loved rock and roll, which is unusual for somebody from his generation. So I glommed onto his musical taste first, and then just kind of went from there.
And then one of your first big breaks was Beatlemania, which I remember as a great tribute to the Beatles, playing John Lennon. How did you land that, and how did that move things along for you?
Basically, I just got out into the world and scratched around and just, tried to be smart to get from point A to point B. But I just stumbled onto Beatlemania. I left the Detroit area, was just kind of flailing around the country, went to Los Angeles, wound up in a touring band, was playing all over the West, all these little towns, and then somehow that led to, I don't know, I was just like really determined to get my life going, and I wound up in Beatlemania.
And how did you get from there to your first album, Marshall Crenshaw, which had such great popularity and still is a great piece of work, and like you said, the music continues on. What did you send out music, or did someone spot you and say, let's make some music together?
Let me see. After a little while of Beatlemania, I just got what you might call like a fire in the belly.
Excellent.
To make my own music, and not only that, I just sort of like had the whole thing in my mind all of a sudden. What the path was for me. To make like a personal statement as a musician. So, I don't know, I just worked at it and did whatever I could to get people to know about it. And I just was determined to make something happen. That's kind of how it went, really.
And how did you go about songwriting those songs that were big in that album? Was it... were you a big songwriter, or is it tough for you? How did you kind of come up with those approaches?
Well, I was on a songwriters panel at South by Southwest on the 20th, and what I said then, I explained then, and I explain often, that I'd never write songs unless I have a recording project. And the only reason I ever wrote any songs was because I wanted to make records, and I just kind of knew in my head, what I wanted them to sound like, and so. I needed songs, so I wrote some songs, and at the same time, I have like really high respect for the power of songs, and so I didn't go about it in a haphazard way. Once I realized that I was going to write songs, I was like deadly serious about trying to make them as good as they could be, but they were all kind of like to serve a certain need. That's why I wrote them.
So it's really when you have to kind of be under the pressure of trying to put out an album or do something with a lot of songs rather than just always writing down ideas or lyrics. I know some musicians do that.
No, I never do that. Yeah. I just write when it's time to have something for a recording project. Then I write something.
And then obviously you're doing music still today. Is it easier or more difficult to write songs now that you have a lot more experience and you've been around on the business for a while, or no?
I hardly ever do it anymore. Mostly I co-write now, which I like a lot better. I've been working a lot over the last couple of years with a fellow named Dan Byrne, and it's really fun to write stuff with him. The last song that I wrote all by myself was maybe like at the end of 2012 when my father was dying.
Oh.
I wrote this one called Stranger and Stranger. And I haven't written a song by myself since then, but I've written a handful with Dan.
What was
it's easier. I know now that I don't have to be nervous about it, that I will be able to do it. I just have to take whatever time it takes to get it done. But I used to panic sometimes, but I don't do that anymore.
Well, you've had so much success. It's probably more confidence makes it say, hey, I can do it, and rather than when you're first starting out, I assume.
I do have a lot of self-confidence at this point, yeah.
It's probably you're probably well earned. And you also now you one of my favorite movies was La Bamba, and you did such a great Buddy Holly in that, and he's another great. Was he an influence? Were the Beatles influence when you played John Lennon, or was those just parts you played?
Yeah, Buddy Holly definitely. Like I said, my dad was into rock and roll, and I was born in 1953, so I heard all of that stuff coming out of his car radio and over at my cousin's house and just all around me, all from the time I was a little kid, Chuck Berry and, you name it. I just heard the whole thing happen in real time. But Buddy Holly was definitely a favorite of mine. I heard that music and it just really grabbed me, grabbed my 5-year-old self or whatever I was, and I still think it's beautiful. It sounds better to me every time I hear it. So he was definitely an influence. Then what happened was I got into my teens and I started to go back and rediscover a lot of the stuff that I heard in my childhood, and that was a big turning point for me, on the path to like making my own music. I figured out at some point that I wanted to just incorporate all of that. I wanted to keep that 50s and 60s rock and roll music close to me, and I wanted to really draw inspiration from it specifically. And like the first songs of mine that are well known are, like I was in that mindset at that time, and still am, But again, I think there's been evolution over the years. But anywho, yeah, the Beatles. I mean, I was ready for them. I already played guitar when the Beatles were on Ed Sullivan, and so yeah, they just were another thing that came along. I mean, a lot of people incorrectly say that they rescued rock and roll from some kind of moribund state. I wholeheartedly reject that,
Interesting.
Rock and roll, I think rock and roll was perfectly great before they came along, but then they did come along and they were great, and they just gave it like 1,000 volts of energy and stuff like that. But I don't, James Brown and Bob Dylan were already on the scene. I think if the Beatles had never come along, the music still would have evolved, still would have been great. It was great before they came along, as far as I'm concerned.
We're talking to Marshall Crenshaw, who will be at Rent Party at the Woodland on Friday, April 10th. One question: how many dates do you tour? Do you tour a lot these days, or how many dates do you take a year?
Yeah, I do. I still play a lot. It's anywhere from maybe 60 to 75 shows a year, which is cool. A lot of traveling. I traveled like crazy during March and January. But I still feel empowered by it. I still dig. Sometimes the travel is a drag these days at my age, but playing the shows is always good medicine for me.
And you're based in New York or New York State? Where are you based these days?
I guess business-wise, it's New York City.
Right.
I actually live a couple hours north of New York City, and I've been in this area now. Like I said, I've lived in this area longer than I've lived anywhere else in my life. My wife and I have been in the Hudson Valley pretty much.
Oh, that's beautiful country, yeah.
Yeah, it's very nice. We moved here in 1987, and we, had a couple of little detours along the way, but mostly we've been here ever since then.
Do you get to listen to much new music today, and do you like any of it? A lot of it seems kind of all the same, or is good stuff coming from the new artists? And who do you listen to, if anyone?
I always blank when somebody asks me that question, because there's too much. I do listen to music. What are my main sources? I guess sometimes I read about something and then check it out. I'm a jazz fan. I subscribe to Downbeat magazine ever since I was in high school.
Excellent.
Now there's all kinds of great artists out there right now. Really, I really do like the state of popular music right now, and there's just a lot of diversity to it. It's always moving forward. I'm not saying I like everything. That would be stupid, but no, this seems like a pretty good time.
Do you get to go and watch other bands or other singers, or are you pretty much busy and have to hear it elsewhere?
Not as much as I'd like to, but I do once in a while. When I was at South by Southwest, I made the rounds. Just kind of walked up and down 6th Street, listened to some stuff. I took my son to see Steve Earle a little while ago.
Excellent.
For my son's 16th birthday. He's a big Steve Earle fan.
Is he a musician of sorts, your son?
I would say that he is a musician of sorts, yeah. I'm not really sure what sort right now, but he's talented. He's got a great sense of rhythm. and he kind of noodles around on his guitar a lot. He had 3 years of classical guitar, 5 years of piano. When he was a kid, I made him do that, and now he's just kind of on his own, on a self-directed learning curve, you know.
Yeah, that South by Southwest seems to be a real great place for new music and different kinds of music. What's your sense of how that's growing?
Well, in fact, I went there not to hustle myself. I went there because I'm working with a. I don't know what to call them. There are only two of them, so they're not exactly a group. Although they have a drummer, so maybe they are a group. I don't know, but it's these young people. They're all 19 now, and they're called the Accidentals. I'm producing them with a guy named Stuart Lehrman, and they really blew up South by Southwest. They were in Billboard magazine as one of the hit acts of South by Southwest, and they're really kind of set in the woods on fire right now, you might say. They're out there touring, and they're brilliant, I think. So I'm involved with them as far as like new stuff goes. Their music is just this really interesting hybrid. You know, they're classically trained. They're not rock and rollers, but they're really savvy and smart kids and very, very creative. So that's one thing I'm aware of. You know, like as far as young acts go, they're up and coming, definitely. And
you also have done your own radio on FUV Saturday nights. Is that still something you do, the Bottomless Pit?
That's exactly what I'm doing right now.
Excellent.
Oh,
yeah, okay.
Pre-recording tomorrow's show right now.
Now tell people about that, and I know FUV is one of the big stations, alternative stations in New York. For people who might not know what that is to tune in, what will they find?
Oh, so you don't get WFUV in Maplewood, New Jersey?
Well, it's Fordham University, correct?
Yeah, that's right. Anyway,
I think it is gettable, and it's always gettable online too.
Yes, it is. They have a lot of fans all over the world. Anyway, yeah, FUV is kind of like a long-standing institution, you might say, and I've had the show on FUV since 2011, 2012, something
Excellent.
like that. It's on Saturday nights, and I've always said it comes on right after Vince Scelza, but now Vince Scelza's leaving.
I know, another legend.
Indeed, yeah. I'm just wrapping my mind around that still, but I can dig it. You know, I know that it's past the passage of time and all that stuff. I feel kind of blue about the whole thing a little bit, but anyhow, that's my show's on at 10 o'clock on Saturday nights on WFUV, and I just play whatever I think of to play. You know, I sometimes say that it's a weekly roundup of items from my personal record collection.
Excellent.
That's about what it is, actually.
Great. Well, we'll let you get back to that. It's such an honor to talk to you again. I'm talking to Marshall Crenshaw. He is one of the greats in my mind, going back to early 80s. He'll be at the Rent Party show at the Woodland. That's Friday, April 10th. You can check that out. We'll have all the links on the website and also to the radio at his website. Sir, a great honor to talk to you, and I know everybody's looking forward to your show and continued success.
Thank you very much, and best wishes to you, okay?
Thank you, sir. Be well.
Bye-bye.